Hi, my name is Linda and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm not the one you're looking forward to hearing from, and I won't take up much time because I want to hear her too, the whole story. This is a woman who gives so much to any place that she's at and any meeting she goes. And she has moved out here instead of staying in Minnesota, and is such a great gift for all of us. I also have the great honor of being one of her sponsors. And there is a lot to listen to, laugh, cry, and learn from this lady. So, what's your name? This is Sid.
Oh, I can't live up to that. Should let her speak. I'm Sid, I'm an alcoholic. And thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to speak at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I can't tell you how my story is going to come out because it comes out different every time. So bear with me here. But I was born and raised into a perfectly natural, normal family. You know, mom and dad, they've been married 64 years. And, you know, my grandparents were married 74 years. And, you know, the legacies of the family. And so I don't exactly know where I came from, except for the fact that both my parents have a tendencies to have like obsessive compulsive type behavior. My dad's a workaholic and my mom is a organizer-aholic and a clean freakaholic and a do it my way-aholic. Um, you know, but you know, it was a wonderful family. The one thing that I never could understand was I never felt like I belonged. I didn't know, I don't know where the feeling came from. I don't know why, but from very young childhood, I never felt like I belonged. And so I spent a lot of my time trying to prove that I mattered. And when I found I couldn't do it because my sister's perfect, and so I could be anything but perfect. So the way to get attention was not so perfect. Um, you know, but the interesting thing is I remember, and I hadn't remembered this until a few years ago. When I was probably about 5 or 6, my closet had you'd open the closet and had a shelf here, and then it had a shelf up above. And I would hide up there, waiting to see when they would miss me. And nobody ever found me up there, you know? And so I'm like, okay, I don't matter. That was the message I took. Wasn't necessarily the message they sent, you know, but that was the message I took. And so I kept my whole life trying to prove that I mattered. You know, I was going to be the biggest, baddest, bestest at everything, which is really hard to do when you're 5 feet tall. Um, you know, but so I had a pretty normal childhood. I always had that sense of ease and discomfort that I didn't quite know what to do with. And 5 days after my 16th birthday, I was given a ride home from a party by a guy, and I was raped on my front porch. And the really scary thing is I didn't know it was happening to me. I had no idea. My mom hadn't talked to me about that shit yet. And so it was scary, humiliating, shaming. I just knew that I could not ever let anybody know. But I had to clean up the mess because there was a bloody mess everywhere. And my mom thought dogs got in a fight in our yard. And so I didn't know what to do with it. So I did what I was told, and that was to just get over it, whatever you're feeling bad about, and move on with your life. So I did. and found myself about 6 months later launching into my first love, which was an eating disorder. And nobody could figure out why I was doing what I was doing, and I wasn't doing it to piss them off. It was, I honestly had to control something. And so I spent until I was, through my teens and college, um, battling with an eating disorder. And then I got married and got pregnant. And the minute I saw the positive this was here in Missoula, at the Planned Parenthood, I went on my lunch break from work, and my eating disorder disappeared. It was gone. It was like, it's not about me anymore. I don't know, it was like God thing again. So that disappeared. And then I proceeded to, after they told me I could not have children, proceeded to have 5 more in a very short period of time. And so I was busy. I was either pregnant, nursing, running, I was busy. And so I didn't really think about drinking. I didn't have time to drink. And drinking was never really my thing because, it's very high caloric stuff, and if I'm going to put it in my body, it can't be fattening. And so fast forward, I was married, had the 5 kids. I adopted one because I didn't have enough. And we had a year where 2 of my children were in life-threatening accidents within the same year. The first one was my 8-year-old. He was driving a 500cc snowmobile. Never had training on that. But their dad insisted they were cool enough that they could do it. And he ended up in the intensive care unit for 34 days in traction because he completely shattered his femur bone and his hip and his leg. We didn't know if he was going to live or die. It was, very traumatic. And so I lived at that hospital for almost 60 days. I would go home at night and take care of the other boys at 8 o'clock, but I had to be back at the hospital by 8 a.m. because Luke wouldn't let anybody give him his blood thinner shots. So I had to be there at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So I just did that, right? And I didn't notice, but towards the end of it, that happened first February 8th. And it was April, I think, by the time he was going to be discharged from the hospital in a body cast. And I noticed I started drinking a beer on my way home from the hospital because it just sounded really good. I don't know why. So that's where I started. I didn't escalate really fast at that point. Didn't take me long though, because Luke started walking in July of that year again, which we didn't know if he'd ever walk again. And in August, my second oldest was in a football accident, and he completely separated his leg from the knee down. There was nothing there. So he was in the exact same stall. They just wheeled the beds into the intensive care unit. They don't have set beds. He was in the same stall as his brother. Same nurses, same doctors. It was, so we went through that, and he had major reconstructive surgery, experimental nerve surgery, just the whole 9 yards. And throughout this, I'm trying to explain why I'm still a good wife, and I want to be a good wife. But deep inside, I'm just seething. I'm so pissed at my ex-husband because I remember sitting at the emergency room or in the trauma room, and my husband said, "Oh, this is all my fault." And the words that came out of my mouth were, "No, it's not your fault. It was an accident. It was just an accident." While in my heart, I'm screaming, "You killed my son, you son of a bitch." So I didn't realize, but I completely just shut down emotionally at that point. That's when I started finding myself drinking a little bit more and a little bit more. And from that stemmed some marriage discourse that my husband decided he wanted to move the family to Florida. And for the first time in my marriage, I stood up and I said, no, I'm not going. And so I am the only example in my family of a divorced person. And so I ended up getting divorced, got custody of the kids because he didn't really care to have much time with them. And that's when my drinking took off. It just started. It was like I couldn't deal with life. I wasn't supposed to be divorced. I wasn't supposed to be at this point in my life. I was supposed to be this, and I wasn't. But so I took off pretty quick, and I went from my one arsenic hour beer a day, which I would drink. I called it arsenic hour beer because it was right after the kids get home from school, and it's not quite dinner, and I'm trying to get stuff ready, and they're hungry, and they don't want to do home. Arsenic hour is what I called it. And so I started that, and then not slowly, but very quickly, I went from one beer a day to 6 beers a day to 12 beers a day to 24. And I was drinking a case of 24-ounce Miller Lights, the ones you get at the football games, the big fat bottles. I was drinking 24 of those a day with tomato juice, though, because there was my nutrients. I was always a thinker. And one of my excuses that I could not be an alcoholic was I still ran 10 miles a day. So as long as I did that, I couldn't be an alcoholic. But I remember so vividly on February 7th of 2007, or no, February 16th of 2007, rolled out of bed, 4 a.m., had to take a tug off a bottle so I could get to the bathroom, without crawling. And I'd go into the bathroom, and then I'd take another tug off the bottle so that I could get into my closet and put on my running clothes. And I'd take a couple more tugs off of that so that I could walk down the stairs instead of fall down the stairs. And by the time I get to the garage, I'm getting myself pretty primed. And I'm sitting on the garage step, and I've got a bottle over here, and I'm tying my running shoes. And I take a tug off the bottle, and the thought comes into my mind, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. And the next thought that came into my mind without hesitation was, and there is not a single solitary soul in this world I can tell. Nobody. I sat there for 5 minutes thinking through anybody that I could tell. And I was even too ashamed to tell my grandmother, who had died 20 years before. I didn't want her to know. So I thought, well, I guess this is just how I'm going to go. And I hope it ends sooner than later. So that was in February of 2007. And then in April of 2007, I never done anything small in my life. I always say any job, big or small, do it right or not at all. And I got my first DUI on April 11th. And I thought it was really a bogus pullover because I was perfectly fine. And they said, well, somebody called the cops because you were swerving. And I said, well, of course I was swerving. I was driving up the Gauntlet, which is this windy road around Lake Minnetonka. And it was raining, and I was putting on my mascara. The fifth and a half of vodka that I've already had today has nothing to do with that. And so they arrested me, and they took my BAC. It was about 2 hours after I'd gotten arrested, and I was a 3.4. And that was where I found my maintenance level was a 3.2. If I went below that, that's where I started shaking, and I couldn't function at all. So as long as I stayed above that, I was good. I was perfectly normal. People thought I was perfectly normal. And so it's that kind of, that I can't stop drinking, but I shouldn't be drinking, that jumping off point. I was there a lot, but I couldn't stop, So I got to spend a couple of wonderful days in the Hennepin County Jail, which is really an experience. they have orange, which I challenge any of you to ever see me in the color orange again. Won't happen. They only had extra large. So I walked around. Now this is, well, you'll find out in a minute, but both times with the pants up over my shoulders, hanging onto them, because you couldn't have a string to tighten them. And otherwise they would fall down. So I'm shuffling around with several large women chasing me around, asking me if I was going to eat my peas and carrots and did I want this off of my meal. And I'm like, go ahead, eat, take, you know. So I got out. Well, and the thing was at that time, it was, my goal was I had to get out of jail. I had to bail myself out because my mother's 70th birthday was April 12th. And I couldn't call or collect from Hennepin County Jail, where they say we have a collect call from a Hennepin County inmate. Happy birthday, Ma. And so I don't know how I managed to finagle it, but I got myself out by 5 o'clock that next night and called my mom. And it didn't occur to me until a couple of years later that they had a big party for her out here in Montana, and I wasn't even invited. You know, that shows you where I was with everybody. And so I, you know, said, okay, I'm sorry. I learned my lesson, you know, blah, blah, blah. And 11 days later, I got a call from my son's school. He was in kindergarten, my youngest, and he was throwing up sick. So I had to go home and get him. I had to go get him. So I thought, well, I haven't drank anything in about 12 hours. So I'll take that little car that I bought for the boys because they took my excursion. And I'll just run down and pick him up. It's only a mile and a half away. I ran down, picked him up. He wanted to go around somewhere different. I don't know why. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I got pulled over. 11 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't drank anything yet, and I was still at 2-3. And so the judge decided that he thought I might have a problem. And they were just starting a pilot program. They had been doing it with just men in the city of Minneapolis, but the county was going to do it. They were going to do it countywide. And it was the intensive DUI supervision program. And they'd never had women in it before. So I was the first woman to graduate. And it was, all I heard from my lawyer was no jail time. And I'm like, oh, sign me up. You know, I can't go to jail. I have things to do. You know, I've got kids to take. This is not going to work with my schedule. And so I I did that, and I was sent away to Arizona in late June. It was my original sober date was June 26th of 2007. And sent to Arizona. It was a really lovely place to be on the 4th of July. Yeah, it was like 126 degrees. So I spent almost 2 months down there, and then but I had to go back because I had to go to these, part of the program was you had to do court appearances once a week, 8 a.m. in front of the judge. You had to meet with your probation officer once a week. You had to pee in a cup. You had to, you know, cops would come to my house any time of the day or night. They could wake me up in the middle of the night, do a BAC, and make me pee in a cup. And those are all things I agreed to when I signed the papers. So, you know, that was, and what saved my life was the fact that the judge who was running that program, who designed the program, he and another judge were both alcoholics, recovering alcoholics. And at the time he had 30 years. He's now got 48 years. And he decided that alcoholics are not bad people. We just do stupid things when we drink and we don't think straight. So he wanted to give people the opportunity to rehabilitate. So the point was you'd go to treatment and then you'd go to aftercare. You'd be very involved in the court. I mean, that's all I could do. and you had to go to 3 meetings a week. So I'm like, oh, I got to go to this stupid A&A shit. And so I'm like 3 times a week, that's really getting into my schedule. I've got other things to be doing. Now I can't drive. I have no car. Got 6 kids, no job. I have no idea how I made it. But the first week I signed the papers and then I went in for my first review and I was going batshit crazy because my kids had been farmed out all over the country. My dogs had been farmed out. I had this house that was trashed because I hadn't taken care of it. And I was literally going crazy. I wanted to drink so bad. I would have killed somebody for it. And so I decided to keep myself busy, and I decided to winterize our boat because we had a ski boat, and we had pulled it out of the garage onto the driveway the year before, and then pushed it back, and then we'd done it again because I never quite got it into the lake when I was drinking, and but I had to get it back, cleaned up and winterized, and so I thought, well, that'll keep me busy. So I'm going at it for several hours, and the last thing I was doing was vacuuming, and so I jumped down, I grabbed the shop vac, and I start vacuuming the floor, and I'm like, this thing's not working. It's not sucking anything. So I hop out, get down, and open up the shop vac, and where the filter's supposed to be, brand new bottle of vodka. Brand new. Now, I did not think at that point, I will lose my children. I will lose my freedom. I had 4 years of prison because I had my son in the car with me. I will lose my house. I'll lose my family. I'll lose everything in my life. I've got to go talk to a judge in less than 12 hours in the morning and talk to my PO officer. And so I'm like, but none of that went through my head. The only thought that popped into my mind was, I paid $17.99 for the damn thing. I'm drinking it. Because I was taught if you make an investment, you follow through with that investment, right? And so I did. I drank it, and I drank the whole bottle in like less than 10 minutes. I drank vodka like water, and why I'm still here today, I have no idea. Because actually, when I left for treatment, my maintenance level was a 0.32 and I weighed 78 pounds. So I was just a walking, talking vodka bottle. All you had to do was screw my head off and I was 100 proof. And so I drank it, but I also did something I've never done before. And this was not me. I called my probation officer and I talked to the judge and I talked to my outpatient treatment guy. I told them all what I did. Sid never tells on herself. Deny, deny, deny. So I don't know why I did that, but I did. And it saved my life because I went to court the next morning and I wasn't feeling very peachy. And the judge said, his quote words were, "I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with you." And he said, "So until further notice, you will go to an AA meeting every single day." Wrote it into my court order. So now I have to go to a meeting every day. And not only that, the judge didn't trust me. He said I had to get a card signed. He didn't believe when I said I would go. He wanted somebody to prove that I went. And so I would take my card to the meeting and I would walk in and I would hand it to somebody to sign and they'd say, "Oh, we'll just hang on to this till the end of the meeting and get it back to you later." I'm like, "Well, you could do it now. It's fine." And what got me and keeps me sober is the fact that my butt was in that chair every day, whether I wanted it to be or not. I had no choice. And I spent the first 4 or 5 months with all of my stories in my head. I could make up a story about each and every one of you as to why I was different and special. Because I was what I like to call a special snowflake. I'm different than everybody else. And but what happened is after you sit there long enough and you listen to people long enough And it's the same people every day. And it was a big meeting. It was like 50 people every day at noon. And I ran out of arguments. I couldn't deny anymore that they were telling my story. They were talking about me when they were talking about their feelings and their actions and their thoughts and all of those. I'm like, how did they find that shit out? You know? So that's when I started to kind of turn a corner. I'd like to tell you that I immediately became perfect little AA, but I wasn't. I fought the whole way. I did everything they told me not to. They said, don't get married or don't get into a relationship. So I got married to a horribly, horribly abusive alcoholic addict, who was a very large man. And he was abusive and bipolar and run the gamut. And so I call it my 10-minute marriage. But it's the one thing in my life that I regret the most because my kids had to go through it. And they had to witness and be a part of things that they should never have in their lives. And so the fact that they want to be around me today is a flipping miracle. Absolutely. So, I did stuff like that. And, they said, well, all of the advice they gave me, I did the opposite. But I learned because they're all right. I didn't realize that. And so I finally decided to get a sponsor and do these steps, And I had heard somebody say, if you do the steps off the wall, you're going to get an off the wall experience. And that's what I was getting. And so I got a gal and I was as honest as I could be with her. And we started working the steps. The one thing was she did not go through the book with me. We just talked the steps and she'd walk me through the steps. And so I learned a lot about the steps and what she had learned from her sponsor, but I didn't have the experiential knowledge of the book, which I believe for me is so vital because no matter how many times I read it, it's different and it never changes. It gives me the same advice and guidance every single time, never wavers. But it took me a long time to get my step one because, I had all these steps figured out in my head. So I was living an intellectual program. I could talk to you about the steps and what people told me they were about and blah, 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 blah. But I had no inner experience. And so when I finally, I remember one day being in my bedroom and I just felt like I wanted to die and curled up in a ball on my bed and I closed my eyes and I've never seen so much darkness in my life. It was so dark, there was nothing there. And I said, God, I can't do this. So that's when I said, I'm powerless. That's when I said, and then I could look because this unmanageability stuff was for the birds as far as I was concerned, because I was a high functioning alcoholic. My kids were all still alive. They had a roof over their heads. They had clothing most of the time. That, I was pulling all this stuff off, right? That's all doable. That's not unmanageable. So I didn't understand what unmanageable was until I went back and looked at how I was living my life and how my brain was operating. What seemed perfectly normal to me, the things I was doing were not perfectly normal. Perfectly normal people don't drink a half a fifth of vodka at 4 o'clock in the morning so they can go run. It's ridiculous, but I thought that was fine. I thought it was pretty special. So I get to that first step and then I look at the second step and it says came to believe. Oh, well, that piece of cake. God, they're talking about God. I know God. I know where he lives. I know what hours he works. I know what his rules are. I know what I'm not going to ever make it into heaven because I've screwed all of his rules pretty much. And I didn't much care for him because he was mean. And So I'm going, okay, we find God. Well, I guess I got God. And now they take me to the third step and it says, now I'm going to turn my will and my life, my thoughts, my actions, my um my wants and my needs. I'm going to turn those over to this God who doesn't like me very much. I don't think so. Right. So I intellectualized the third step for a long time, almost 2 years. And I would say the third step prayer and I would get through it, and God, thy will be done, not mine. What I didn't realize was my brain wouldn't stop at that point. It would say, okay, now God, here's your list. This is what I'd like to see you get done today. And we'll get back together tonight and talk about it. That was my third step. That was my intellectual third step. And so I had an incident with the 10-minute marriage. It was a really bad nightmare, and there was some horrible things that happened in the house, and I kicked him out because he was drunk. And I went to bed and I thought, I'm so cool. I made it. Look at me, I'm rocking it. I did my prayers. I get into bed and I wake up about 1 a.m. and there's a bottle of vodka and 2 Smirnoff coolers right by my bed. He had come back and put them there, but he didn't make me drink anything. That was on me. And I rolled over and it was like a fluid motion. I didn't even think about it. I just saw the bottle. I rolled over, I grabbed the bottle, I took the cap off and I tipped it up. And when I tipped it up and started drinking, I saw the bottom of the bottle and I heard, if you get to the bottom, you're dead. And so I stopped. And I went in my bathroom and I threw it up as much as I could. And then I went downstairs and I had a stepson at the time who had just gotten back from his third tour in Iraq. And I said, Jake, you got to help me because I'm an alcoholic and I'm going to drink this and I don't want to. And he took the bottle and I don't know what he did with it and I don't care. But then he came upstairs and he sat with me for the rest of the night. I don't know why he did that, but he sat with me. He cared. And that was one of the first times I thought somebody actually really cared. And he's an amazing kid. Well, he's not a kid. He's 40. But anyway, so that was where I started to shift. And at that point, something clicked in my heart that said, okay, this third step means really a higher power. So I had to go back. I had to go all the way back to one to be able to say, okay, I'm powerless and I need a power. I got to find me a power because the one I'm trying to rely on is going to kill me because it was me, I was working a fabulous 2-step program, self-sufficiency, self-knowledge, had it down pat. And so that was when it shifted to my heart and something clicked and I started to understand. And it meant something to me now when I was saying my prayers. And this power that I was praying to was not the one that I had the picture of at my church in the stained glass window. It was this loving, caring, peaceful, serene presence that if I just stopped for a second, it was always there, always. And I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of times, but I've got so much experience that I do have a higher power. I can't describe it to you. I can't give you a picture or anything, but there is a power working in my life today that is undeniably not me. And it wants the best for me, and I call him dude. At one point, excuse me, but I called him what the fuck? Because I was so mad at him. And I realized I could get mad at this power, can handle it. He, she, it can handle it. It's not a revengeful get back at you. That's an egocentric human trait, is that when we get hurt, we want to hurt somebody else. And I don't think God has that. At least not the God of my understanding. And so once I could figure out, that there was something out there because I shouldn't be alive. You know, there was just so many different times it just shouldn't be. And so I decided I'd look at starting this Searching and Fearless moral inventory. And I went through about 3 sponsors before I could do this step, because every time they'd ask me to start the 4th step, I would say, you know, this really isn't working for me. You don't get me. You've never had children, whatever it was. And I would fire them, or not. Well, I don't like that word. You don't fire anybody. You know, it's a blessing to have somebody in your life to work with you. And if I'm not the one that's going to be the best for somebody, that's okay. You know, it's not a hiring and firing. It's a unity of everybody getting together and saying, we're just here to help. And some of us can be more helpful than others. That's all it is. But I did fire him at that time. And so that's when I ended up with my first real sponsor, is what I refer to her as, because I also had a pretend one when I was in court. He told me I had to get a sponsor, and so I got Lisa. She was cool. I loved Lisa. We had it all together, because she was in my head. And the judge, after 3 weeks of that, I'm standing up in front of him discussing my week and talking about my wonderful sponsor, Lisa. And he said, well, that's really, really nice, Sid. He said, you know, now I'd like you to get a sponsor with a pulse. He would call you out on everything. You know, you'd be telling him this story and he'd say, well, that's really, really interesting. Now turn around and tell everybody else. Because there was a whole group of us, you know, tell your lie to those drunks and see if they buy it. You know, so he was loving, kind, firm, disciplined. He was everything I needed, and I swear I didn't want. And that man saved my life. No holds barred. So then I could start going into the 4th and the 5th step. And the 4th step, you know, I don't think I was different than anybody else. I was like, yeah, you know, I'll do it later. Well, I'll get to it. And my sponsor said, take 10 minutes every day. That's it. And we're doing your 5th step on this day. That was it. Didn't give me any, you know, that was it. So I just started writing stuff out, and had a pretty good list of resentments. I was really, really good at resentments. I could only come up with 2 fears, though. I was afraid of grasshoppers, and I was afraid of flying. Those were the only 2 fears I could come up with. And because I had no comprehension of what fear was, I didn't realize it was the force that was driving my entire life. I was afraid I wasn't enough. I was afraid you didn't like me. I was afraid I didn't deserve to be here. I was afraid I had to prove something. And so my whole life was fear. So when I really started looking and I got to know, I really did have only 2 fears. One was of being alive and the other one was of dying. And I was trying to walk that fine line and figure out what this life was. And I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to live. And so I got through my 4th and my 5th step, and I was all ready and geared to go. And my sponsor said, we finished our 5th step. She said, okay, now I want you to go home for an hour. Just relax, take it easy, think over what we've done. If anything comes up, you know, give me a call. And we'll start step 6 next week. And I'm like, I thought we were just supposed to, you know, move it along. She took 3 months on step 6 with me. And I needed that to understand what it meant to be entirely ready to have God remove my defects of character, not to have God remove my entire soul, my defects of character, those things that are standing in the way between me and you and me and God. And, you know, so I'm really grateful that she did that for me. And so we did the 6th and 7th step. And then I had a bully list for my 8th step, because I had like 4 pages from my 4th step. But there were a lot of people on my 8th step list that were not on my 4th step list, because I had hurt them. They hadn't done anything to me. I had hurt them. And that was something I was really needed to acknowledge, because I took a lot from people. I took so much of my parents' love and worry and concern, and I took so much for granted, so that really, I had to stop and look at that, and then decide how I was going to make those amends, because going to somebody and saying I'm sorry doesn't cut the bill, because I had said I'm sorry so many times. I even got to the point where before I even started drinking, I would say to my kids, I'm sorry doesn't mean shit. Your words don't mean anything to me. You got to show me. And here I was all full of words and no action. And so this is where I started to learn that my actions have to match my words if I want to be the person that I want to be. My character is determined by what I do in a crisis and how I show up. And those are things that are important to me, because I do want to be a good person, and I do want to help other people, because I believe that every single human being in this world matters. Every single person matters. We all have our reasons. We don't need to know what they are, but God created you for a special reason. And I believe that to the depth of my soul. So I'm not any specialer or less special. I'm just one of the guys, and so I've done okay on my ninth step amends. There's a few I haven't been able to make because I haven't been able to. I had one where my next door neighbor absolutely, I probably did something stupid, but absolutely hated me. She could not even look at me. I'd drive into my driveway and she'd get up if she was in her yard, and she'd bolt into the house. Wouldn't even look at me. And so I said to I digress. I got my second sponsor when I was about 2 years sober. And the reason I got her was God kept telling me to ask her. And I'm like, I don't need a sponsor. Yes, you do. I don't need a sponsor. Ask her anyway. So I asked her, and because I said, nobody's gone through the book with me. I want to go through the book. And so I now have this sponsor. And so she said to me, well, Sid, what we'll do is you write her a note and just say, I know that I've hurt you. I'd very much like to make amends. If this is something that you'd be willing to listen to, please let me know. And she was my next door neighbor, so I just took it over and put it in her front door. Didn't hear boo. Oh, and my amend, I had written, and my amend will be, I'll stay out of your life. Because sometimes that's the best amend I can do for somebody, is to just stay out of their life. And so I got nothing, absolutely nothing. And then you fast forward about 8 years, and I walk into my big book study that I go to every Monday night, and she and her husband are sitting there. Because it's an open big book study to Al-Anon, AA, any Anons you want to come up with, or anybody that wants to learn about the big book. And so they were there for a different reason, and she came up to me and started talking to me. And I've been her Al-Anon sponsor for 5 years. You can't make this shit up. You really can't, That's nothing I've done, And so my favorite step, well, they all are, but my favorite step is 10, because basically 10 to me encompasses the entire program. It encompasses everything I need to know, because in order to take a daily inventory, I have to have done step 4 and 5 to know how to do that and what I'm looking for. And in order to recognize that I need to take an inventory, I have to realize that I'm powerless and I need a power, right? And then I have to recognize that I need God's guidance to tell me what to do, because my ideas are not so great, And so I get the privilege of doing a 10th step every night. And I'm so blessed. I have a card that has the 10th steps question, inventory on right there. I go through with my notebook every night with my inventory and I write out my answers. And, some nights it's, I showed up okay today, got go to sleep. But a lot of times it's, most of the time I try and be as intricate as I can. Um, and so if I do that and I'm continually seeking that power that I'm told in the second step is going to restore my sanity and is going to help me live a happy whole life, I want to continue to seek that power because obviously it knows way more than I do. And it's so much better at managing my life than I am. And then step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of doing these steps. So it tells me right there, if I do 1 through 11, I will have had a spiritual awakening. However I want to describe it, design it, whatever, I will have changed. I am not going to be the same person because my perspective on life has changed. My perspective on myself, God, and everything around me has changed. And you can't just make that happen in a treatment center, or with a therapist for a couple days a week. It takes time and it takes work and it takes practice. And that's my favorite word in all the steps. I get to practice these principles in all of my affairs. Not just when I'm sitting in a meeting or when I'm meeting with a sponsee, when I'm in line behind the old lady that's counting out $10 worth of pennies at the counter and I'm in a hurry because I think I need to be somewhere. I got to practice my principles everywhere. Am I perfect at it? Hell no. But I'm trying. I want to be, and so I just get up every day and I get to redo this process. So it's really not work. It's just it's a way for me to become a better person because I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to that. The woman who was lying on the floor of her garage after drinking 2 bottles of rubbing alcohol, trying to kill myself. I don't want to go back to that. And today my life is amazing. I just had the most fabulous week, even though I probably bitched a little bit about it, but I did have the most fabulous week. I had 4 of my 6 boys home and my granddaughter in the house all week. And we had the most amazing Thanksgiving. I was blessed to have 2 of my sponsees come and eat with us. And, it was just fun. We had a lot of fun. And, I bitched about having to clean up after them and everything because they walk through the door and they're like teenagers again. But I'm sad because they all left today. And, but I'm so grateful for what I got because I got the most wonderful memories of a Thanksgiving that I could ever dream of. Those are the gifts that I get in this program. I get the gift of waking up in the morning and going, thank you, God. Yep. For my life. And, that's something that I would have never even considered before, so you guys helped me and you still help me every day because I am constantly learning. And the minute I stop learning, I hope I get slapped on the face with a shovel because I don't want to stop. So thank you very much for allowing me to share. With that, I pass.